Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. I'm your host, Josh, and we have Blake, our co-host, returning to the show to chat all about The Bad Batch, Season 1, Episode 10. It's called Common Ground, launched July 2nd this year, 2021. And we're going to be getting into all that business right there, as well as some conversation regarding general Star Wars stuff later on, High Republic related. We got a whole new wave of High Republic content that just dropped on the shelf recently, so we're going to be chatting about that, as well as some Darth Vader chat, Anakin Skywalker, a bunch of other stuff. Stay tuned to the end. Always great to have you back. Let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
Welcome back, Blake.
Hey, good to be here. You look like you've heard the timing for this 100 times already.
You know, I think as of this episode, actually, I have heard it over 136 times.
That's pretty good. Yeah. You have to keep a record of that. I know we did a 100th anniversary special, so a few more will hit number 200, I think.
150th? Yeah, we did a 150th anniversary. We also did a 100th anniversary. So, wait, sorry. We did a 50th anniversary, I believe, and we did a 100th anniversary. So we'll do a 150th anniversary when that comes around, which isn't going to be too far off.
Is it anniversary, or should we say episode?
It's an episode, but it's a celebration episode. You know, it's not as celebratory as the 100th anniversary or 100, I guess, episodes released. But we'll do something. Maybe another trivia or something like that. That was pretty fun.
We're pretty good. We could do a live stream commentary watching the entire season of Bad Batch.
Yeah. Hey, guys, get ready, guys, for I don't know, what is that?
12 hours or something?
12-hour special. Yeah.
Yeah, it won't be that bad. Probably be like 4 hours, but still, that's a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good thing there's a podcast, not a YouTube show. People would be seeing us with rings under our eyes, you know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm just watching Star Wars on end. But hey, that was our lives before the podcast, and that'll be our lives after the podcast.
You know, I was it's funny because like before we do this, you know, I've got to mentally prepare myself to talk for 45 minutes or whatever. And if I've had a blown out day where I'm just, you know, I've got no energy, I got to pump myself up with some snacks, get my coffee going, all that stuff. I'm eating gobstoppers right now to get my sugar intake. So
is that your dinner?
I had pizza for dinner. What a healthy lifestyle I live right now. It's all for the energy, and then that way we can do this thing, and I'm not half asleep at the mic. So you know it works out. But
Fair
it's
enough.
funny. I saw this. Do you know Unbox Therapy YouTube channel?
I know several unboxing channels, but I don't know if one of them was this one.
Fellow Canadian guy, his name is Lou Later, or Lou from Unbox Therapy. And anyway, he's a funny guy. But I was watching one of his reviews for a projector I'm looking at, and he was saying something at the beginning of the video where he's like, "Yeah, I was watching a movie with my kids the other day, School of Rock, and I swear, Jack Black in that movie, at any given time, is channeling all the energy in the universe."
Yeah. Legit. That guy has crazy energy, especially back in the day.
It's unbelievable, man. Like,
Yeah,
he's like a supercharged Duracell battery.
Oh man, you should watch him. Like, he did that for years. That was like his shtick, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
back when he did like the original Tenacious D television series for HBO. Like, that was his acting debut, right? And that's all it was just him, high energy, just screaming the whole time.
I want to see Jack Black in Star Wars.
Do we though? What would he play?
He would play this like off the hook like cantina owner, kind of like Dex,
Okay,
but it would be called Blacks.
I could see that.
J Blacks.
What if he played the lead singer / guitarist of a rock band in the Star Wars universe?
That'd be pretty good too.
Right? I feel like that'd be super fitting.
JB and the crew.
Tanakh.
So
First
good.
half of Tenacious D. Right? Oh man.
Oh man. All right, so we just watched this Bad Batch episode, and this is the one where the Bad Batch crew goes to Raxus, pulls a job for Sid, trying to rescue and liberate the separatist senator from Raxus and get him off world, because that's his escape plan. He gets his droid to call Sid and hire a crew to do the job and everything like that. That's the episode. Very interesting episode because this is the first one that we've kind of seen where Omega just gets left behind.
Yeah, that stood out to me too.
Yeah, I pointed this out to you early on. I was like, it's kind of nice. It's refreshing and new to see this, because in every other Star Wars show we've seen so far, the kid is always just pulled right into this action, right? This ugly warfare. Right.
Yeah, and it's always the same story where it's like kid seems helpless and then the kid does something like you wouldn't expect and everyone's impressed and that helps them get away.
Yeah,
And they just
exactly.
Do that over and over again.
And this time around, it was just the same story, except she was able to do that from her end instead of going on the mission. So, but yeah, regardless, I thought it was nice that it was like, oh, hey, they're acknowledging the fact that she's actually a kid. And unlike Rebels where Ezra is like just some street rat kid and they're like, hey, let's just go kill some stormtroopers and break some Jedi out of jail and like, steal some stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess
I
feel like they kind of put that under the the umbrella of he's a Jedi, so he can get away with it.
Yeah, he's a Jedi, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's not like some average kid.
Whatever,
yeah, no, even though like pretty well untrained.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, I think, is laid at the foot of the fact that this is supposed to be a kid's show.
Yeah.
So they want the kid to be there to represent the kid audience.
Right, exactly.
But I know from a logical standpoint, it doesn't make the most amount of sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems to be a common, I guess, complaint online right now is that the Bad Batch does more or less have the same trope as Mandalorian, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was a Disney thing saying, hey, this worked, we made money, let's do it again.
Yeah, the formula, yeah.
Yeah. But hopefully that doesn't take root too much. I'd like to see them, do new stuff. Because like the main thing to me that is the difference between the Mandalorian with Baby Yoda versus this with Omega is Baby Yoda is an infant. So he is really powerful, but he can't really do stuff on his own, right?
Right.
Like he manages to like solve problems that he's put in front of.
Yeah. Whereas
this like Omega is old enough that she can actually go out and do her own adventures.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with Grogu and Omega both, they seem to be the key for getting kind of the focused characters out of a hard place kind of thing, just in the nick of time with whatever that they got up their sleeve. And it's always this unexpected thing, right? So I mean, I'm thinking of Grogu moments where he's like stopping the flamethrower with the Force and stopping the Mudhorn with the Force, and that kind of stuff. And Omega here pulling out the Queen's Gambit skills going on. I mean, I feel like Brad, the director of the show, just went up to Dave one day after watching Queen's Gambit. It was like, hey Dave, we need that in our show. And then Dave's like,
what do you think?
You know what, Brad? Just put it in. Queen's Gambit. Let's go.
It's pretty funny. It worked out though. She managed to pay off their debts.
Yeah, it worked out. And by the way, if anyone hasn't seen Queen's Gambit, it's an excellent show. Watch it on Netflix. It's awesome. So yeah, it was interesting seeing Raxus again. We've seen Raxus very very few times in Star Wars so far. Raxus is the capital of the Separatist Alliance, at least when there was one. Now, of course, that's all gone. Similar to Coruscant.
Not to interject, but do you find it funny that the Separatists, their core world is a rename of a junk planet?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what that's all about. Maybe Raxus Prime is just like in the same system or whatever, but
Maybe it's a moon in Raxus?
maybe in the Raxus system. I
Yeah.
have no idea. Honestly. I have the Star Wars Atlas on my shelf in the other room. I'm not going to go and get it, but yeah, it's got a similar name to it.
Is Raxus Prime still canon? That's my question.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe Raxus Prime is still canon, and I can actually look that up right now. It does have a canon page and showed up in the Star Wars Galactic Atlas, which is like a newer kind of picture book atlas for kids. It was also in the Visual Encyclopedia and in the Rebels files, which is like a kind of like the Book of Sith or the Book of the Jedi that I got behind me on the shelves, but the Rebel files is like one for the Rebellion.
I think there's also a rumor that that's where Darth Maul was, and when he was insane.
Yeah, so in Legends, it's got like a lot more stuff to it. In fact, Raxus Prime was one of the primary locations. I think it was in The Force Unleashed. When you're playing as so that's where you fight that weird spider leggy kind of Jedi guy.
He's one of the Jedi Masters in the Council.
Yeah, I'm totally blanking on his name now, but yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So Kazdan Paratus, that's his name, Kazdan Paratus. So Raxus has the same name. I don't know if it's in the same system or not, but unlike Raxus Prime, which is a junk world, Raxus is like this lush world full of. It's basically like Earth, but I don't know. It's got these nice trees, got a lot of water. Yeah, it's got continents. It's it's like an earthy looking environment.
It looked very Onderon like to me.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of Onderon, we have seen Raxus before when it was in an episode called Heroes on Both Sides with Ahsoka. It's the first time she meets her friend Lux Bonteri. And Lux Bonteri's mother, Mina Bonteri, met up with Padme on this planet to discuss a peace treaty between the Republic and the Separatist Alliance. And Dooku had some assassins kind of foil that whole plan or whatever. There was something up with that. But eventually, Mina Bonteri dies later on in the show. But we did see Raxus in that episode. It was also mentioned in Rogue One, the Catalyst novel. And it also showed up in the Dark Disciple novel with Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress, the unproduced Clone Wars episodes. And it's been mentioned a few times through some other novels in the Star Wars canon. So we have visited Raxus before, but this was kind of like the first time we see a lot of the focus in on like that whole senatorial area. And Mina Bonteri wasn't the senator for that planet. She's actually the senator for Onderon. But because at the time that was the Separatist capital, similar to Coruscant is to the Republic, that's where Padme met her. So we've never met the actual senator of Raxus before. We've only ever seen Count Dooku leading his speeches in the Grand Hall there in one of the Clone Wars episodes. But that was pretty much the extent of what we saw from the political side of things. So it was cool to see a new part of the planet.
I really liked his monocle.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, we haven't seen a character that's looked like this before. So
yeah. It was kind of like Mr. Monopoly if he's from like Onderon.
yeah. It was fun. It was fun looking. And you know, for a post Revenge of the Sith kind of era, I mean, this guy does not seem like an enemy at all, right?
No.
And he's a separatist. Yeah, and he's a separatist senator. And you know, it's kind of the point, I guess, that they're trying to make. It's like the war is over. And the real enemy is now the Empire. And anyone who is just a senator or a person or whatever from both sides, they're now the heroes of each of those sides if they're not part of the Empire, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like they're now going into a new war
Yeah.
directly at the heels of the old war. So really the lines of battle have been redrawn, right? So suddenly the previous alliances they're no longer accurate. Everything needs to be like reconfigured.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I noticed that he didn't even react at all when he heard that the clones' voices, the Bad Batch, right? When they came to rescue him, there was no like question about the fact that they were clones. And it had me a bit curious for a second. I was like, why? Like, I mean, I thought maybe he would just get his droid to call Sid for help and that Sid would hire some random crew of whoever, right? I'm assuming that he didn't expect the Bad Batch to show up because he probably never knew that they were a thing. Mm-hmm. But there they are. And he didn't at all second guess the fact, like, should I go with these clone troopers?
Yeah. Is this a trap?
Yeah. Is this a trap? Like, is this a joke? I mean, like, what the heck is going on here? They're clones like the ones that put me in this captive chair. So I thought that was a little weird.
No, it's a good point. You think he would second guess it a little bit, not just go along for the ride.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, it's a very good point because, like, for all he knows, they could be like, it could be an inside job, and it could be, hey, we're here to rescue you. And they go around the corner, and they just execute him.
Right, yeah, anything like that, right? And anyway, so I'm just curious, what kind of things did you notice through this episode?
I was really taken aback at how quickly the Empire has like put out uniforms and got civilians in power. It's like, we didn't, because before this, like the Imperial officer, the lady at the beginning there, that would have been a clone.
Yeah, in some cases,
most cases, like there were civilians, but not they weren't very common.
Right. Like people like Tarkin and stuff were a bit of a Tarkin, Yularen.
Yeah, those are the only like two I could think of. Yeah,
there weren't like a whole lot of civilian volunteers.
Yeah,
I guess in the military. So yeah, I'm that's kind of
more or less the point I'm getting at is they've already got new like citizens who have like signed up to join the Empire, and they're already in positions above most clone troopers and giving out orders, and they've already got the brand new uniform that is exactly the same as what we get in like A New Hope.
Right.
So that's very quick. And that said, I do know there is the scene right at the end of Revenge of the Sith where they have the new uniforms and everything. So I get that they do have the excuse to do that, but it still seems like way too fast.
I'm very curious about this whole uniform thing, whether or not we're going to have stormtrooper costumes be starting to be dealt out by the end of the season. You know, because they've made it very clear in this first season so far that it's been quite a few months since the first episode in the story, right? Like time proceeds quite fast between these episodes that we see. They're not, you know, day after day after day. They're weeks apart in universe, right? So I'm curious to see whether or not this season ends approximately a year later, and we get these stormtrooper outfits being dealt out and this and that, because this show really is going to be the canon stamp of time as to when these stormtroopers get their actual costumes, you know.
No, that's true. I kind of hope it's season 2, just because I'm really enjoying the twist of, like we talked about in the last podcast, of having the clone troopers go from heroes to villains so quickly. Because the moment they have stormtrooper armor, they're just going to feel like any other stormtrooper. Yeah,
exactly. And then it'll be hard to defer the clone stormtroopers from the incompetent regular people stormtroopers.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. But here's another thing, is the Clone Wars season finale gave us a flash forward effect of what happens down the road with Vader finding Ahsoka's lightsaber on whatever planet they crash on. And he picks it up out of the snow. And those were stormtroopers. Those were snow troopers, stormtroopers, you know, of the classic era. And it's not really determined how far that is, it's obviously before Rebels, and I would assume that's probably sometime after the Vader Dark Lord of the Sith comic series. But if I were to pinpoint kind of roughly where it is, I would probably place it like maybe around before the events of Jedi Fallen Order, the campaign.
Okay.
That's kind of where I would pin it, which is maybe 4.5 years after Revenge of the Sith. So, assuming that that's kind of how far they're willing to flash forward, that's also how far forward they flashed with Rebels as well. So when Rebels had their finale, they had that flash forward scene as well. So quick spoiler if anyone hasn't watched Rebels. They did a flash forward scene to post Return of the Jedi where Ahsoka shows up, collects Sabine, and they go off to find Ezra and Thrawn, right? And that was also 4.5-ish years later, because the original trilogy spans a length of about 4 years in time. There's like 3 years between 4 and 5, and then 1 year between 5 and 6. So that's like roughly 4 years. And Rebels ends about a year before Episode 4, a couple months before, because we also got Rogue One tucked in there as well. So, roughly 4.5 years, close to 5. That was their flash forward. And then when Clone Wars did theirs, I was like, oh, maybe this also kind of has the same time frame. So whatever they do with Bad Batch, I'm wondering like if this is a 1-season show, which I highly doubt it will be. I'm pretty sure there's going to be an ongoing thing. But whenever they finish off this show, I'm curious to see what they do to also kind of, what are they going to flash forward to? Are they going to flash forward to something Rebels related, or like what are they going to do, right? Because a lot of the time they're always setting up something. But
if I'm not mistaken, Resistance didn't have a flash forward.
Resistance was a very different show.
True, but I'm saying they also have the option to not do one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Rebels, Resistance is very because it was visually it was a very different show. It was targeted at a very different audience, and it was also just handled very differently in terms of the storytelling. And it didn't feel like anything that Rebels and Clone Wars did. Whereas Rebels, as much as it was its own unique experience of a show, it did pull ties from Clone Wars quite a bit. So I'm not surprised that they didn't do it. But
yeah, I'm also thinking like in that film, what would they have flashed forward to?
I'm kind of wondering that myself. Yeah,
I don't think there'd be some crazy reveal. It would be maybe the main character like joining the Resistance formally, or like, you know what I mean, like being an actual proper X-wing pilot for the Resistance. But I wouldn't see like a story reveal.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself here, trying to think of how this show's going to end with how many episodes we got left? 6? 4? 6? I think it's somewhere around there.
Yeah, depends how many. What the total is, I guess.
Yeah,
I thought it was 12, but I don't think that's right.
I believe it's I believe the whole first season is going to be let me find out here, 16 episodes. That's how much it's going to be. Yeah. So the next one is going to be called Devil's Deal, and the one after is going to be called Rescue on Ryloth. Interesting. The one after that is called Infested, and then episode 14 will be called War Mantle. And we have no titles for the last 2 so far, but that's the next 4 titles set up. I'm just like, I'm very curious to see where they want to go with the show, because, with Clone Wars, they have a goal. They have this goal of telling a narrative between episodes 2 and 3, filling in this so-called Clone Wars event that happened through the galaxy, right? So there was no necessarily like plot, but the plot also involved the plot that the prequels had built up anyways. So it was a very safe show, right? Like they were constructing the show amongst this grand plan and this war that was going on at the time. Lots of stuff going on, right? With Rebels, it was like, oh, let's set up the rebellion. Like, let's tell the story of the origins of the Rebel Alliance and stuff like that. it's just like this show, as nice as it is to get a Clone Wars sequel and everything, I just don't know what it's doing, right? Like
That's
like
fair.
so far in the show, as much as I like it and as much as I want to see more of it and get to know these characters more and get more action and stuff like that, and for the show to mature like Clone Wars did, I'm also just like a little torn with what they're actually trying to achieve with a story, right?
Because if you're comparing it to the shows directly, how like what they're doing in the galaxy and their timelines and stuff, like, you know, showing the beginning the rebels and whatnot, this show you would think then would be showing the transition from the Republic into the Empire.
Yeah,
and they're kind of doing that, but
Right.
because our heroes are on the run from the Empire, it's more or less like bits and pieces of it.
yeah, and that's kind of what I have to say about this as far as their goal goes. As far as I can place it, aside from telling a story about a bunch of rogue clone troopers that survived the purge and whatnot, I would say, oh, how cool would it be to tell a story of that in an era that we really don't have a lot of story about, right? And see this transition of the Republic to the Empire happen. Like that's cool, right? And we've talked about that quite a bit and how cool that really is. But if that's kind of the main goal of telling stories that show this transition, I'm kind of like, well, I'd like to bring up that subject of why don't we get what Clone Wars did and tell story arcs with other characters, right? And like, they haven't done that. They've just completely focused in on these Bad Batch characters.
That is really interesting. Like that, I think it's tough because they need to introduce those other characters, and that they haven't done in any show since Clone Wars. In Clone Wars, we had the excuse of you already knew the characters other than the clones. And even some of the clones you knew, because you knew like Commander Cody, for example.
Yeah.
I think that's why in Rebels as well as Resistance and this show, it's all about just the crew that you know. Because you need to take the time to introduce, and then it starts to feel like a spin-off if you introduce a character and then go off with them, right?
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of that, and I think part of it is they're trying to make it feel more like the original trilogy. And I know that was a big thing for Rebels, is they wanted it to feel like the original trilogy where you follow like a group of 4 or 5 characters, right? You're not going this way and that, following a whole bunch of different storylines like they did in the prequels.
Right. Yeah, I could understand that. It's like they want to take the spirit of that kind of storytelling and then put it into a Clone Wars based show, I guess. But I mean, this is as much as I like that, this is where Clone Wars really shines, because they felt so comfortable just telling these other stories with other characters, and they were some of the best arcs ever were with those characters, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like the Umbara arc or
still one of my favorites.
Yeah, and some of those bounty hunter arcs were amazing. And it's just like, man, I want to see something like that. Like I want to see like what we got with the Cad Bane so far. I think that was one of my favorite episodes when he showed up. And
in Bad Batch.
Yeah, in Bad Batch.
Okay.
And it gives me hope that we're going to see this revival of those Boba Fett Cad Bane moments. But going back to an episode like this where it's like it's like the Bad Batch pulling another job. I'm not really, I don't want to say I'm getting tired of it yet, because we're only like 10 episodes in. Yeah. But it
feels too much like a D&D campaign where you got a new mission every time you meet
it's
together.
Just like, okay, it's just another quest. They're just trying to get more money. They're just trying to pay off their debts. It's like, okay, let's go somewhere with this, right? Like, I mean, the last one, like the one with Crosshair, was awesome. And the first time Cad Bane showed up, that was probably, since the pilot episode, that was probably the best episode I've seen.
Agreed.
And and the pilot was awesome. And so those two so far have been kind of the shining episodes for me, at least. But it's just, I feel like this show has so much potential that could be wasted if they just stick to this formula They're going to be digging themselves a hole because it's not going to feel fresh by the time season 2 rolls around.
Yeah, it is tricky, honestly. Like, they would need to introduce a new character, which in theory they have. They've introduced Cad Bane. And now we've seen this episode where Cad Bane isn't in it, which leaves the next episode, theoretically, to be about Cad Bane.
Yeah.
So, like,
I will say,
could work out, but I wouldn't hold my breath just because the last 2 shows I've seen.
Exactly. I will say this, because I've been keeping track. This is the first episode that we did not get a returning / familiar face from the Clone Wars. And I know some people are probably very happy about that because every episode since the pilot, we've had at least one recognizable face show up in some way whatsoever, right? Whether it be Fennec, Cad Bane, Bib Fortuna, or whoever, right? Like Kane and Jarrus, it's always been somebody, right?
Yeah.
Ever since the beginning, right? And now finally, this episode was like the first one that kind of went and did something with just the core group that we know from this show and didn't bring in anyone externally from Clone Wars or Rebels.
It's funny though, because you were just saying how you don't like, you want the show to show these others character arcs.
Yeah.
Those are all characters that we could go back to.
Yeah. No, I was just pointing it. I was just pointing it out. I was just pointing it out because I know that there is some people out there who are like, I'm tired of seeing the same people all the time. And I'm like, man,
Galaxy's so small.
For me, I'm like, man, bring it on. Like, I want to see these familiar faces and familiar characters. And maybe it's just my hope that they just finish those 20 something odd Clone Wars episodes. But, I don't have a problem with it. Whereas like, I don't know, I don't have a problem with it to a certain degree, but it does get a little weird when the same core group is seeing all these other different characters, right? It would be different if it's like, oh yeah, like we ran into Cad Bane and then that carries over for an episode or 2 and then he's gone again, and then we go another couple episodes without seeing anyone recognizable.
Yeah.
And, then it's like, I can really appreciate that. Like I freaked out when I saw Cad Bane. I was like, that's amazing. They're blowing.
Do you think at the end they're going to do, let's get the gang back together again and they bring all the people they've met to overcome some issue?
See, that's what I'm hoping doesn't happen. That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that I'm like, that just makes everything feel quite small, but yeah, I mean, it's just something for them to be very carefully handling is bringing in these other faces when dealing with new characters. And that's the approach that they took with the sequels, but they almost took it a little far in some areas where they're like, we want people to only care about these new characters and let's just get rid of the old ones, right? So, that approach I don't think worked out the best for a lot of people. They felt like, oh, we didn't get enough screen time with Luke or Han or whatever. But and so with an animated show though, it's got so much potential for bringing in anybody, any character that they want, and as long as someone can voice the character, we're good. And I like seeing that kind of stuff. I would love to see Daniel Logan come back as young Boba Fett and see what happens there, and
I
whatever.
hope they do a job with the clone commandos from the game.
Yeah,
the Delta Squad.
Yeah, that would be pretty. Imperial Commandos. Honestly, that would make an amazing story arc in this show. Have the Bad Batch, set the Imperial Commandos loose on the Bad Batch to hunt them down because maybe Crosshair fails to do it and he dies or whatever. They're probably never gonna. Yeah, or they're here's the thing, I've got I don't know. My expectations are Crosshair has a redeeming moment. They're able to get the chip out. Everybody wins, right? Like that's my kind of general pessimistic view of what's going to happen with his character. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I'm hoping that he's a lost cause and they've lost a friend forever and they've got to kill him or something like that, something painful.
Well, here's the thing with Dave Filoni. He looks at the obvious answers and then he finds something really clever you never thought of. So
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the two obvious answers. So I'm curious to see if he managed to pull something out of the hat again.
Yeah, Dave's the kind of guy that'll have Crosshair like fall down a black hole and he's going to pop up later in another show or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I've got my worries. I've got my hopes. I've got the things I'm very happy with so far about the show. But I mean, you know, emotionally, I want this show to push itself further out of this D&D aspect, you know, just quest after quest.
No, I agree with that. And I think it's got to be leading to a point where they're going to start taking on the Empire. Like,
yeah.
As their adversary and not just something they're running from.
Yeah. And here's the other thing is like, it's so far off from the timeline of Rebels because Rebels is where the rebellion kind of starts to begin. But we do know that prior to that, there's these rebel cells that operate individually. Kind of a crazy shocker to think that these rebel cells have been operating for 15 years before that show begins. But maybe that's just what they're going for. And they're like, yeah, Bad Batch is going to be one of these rebel cells that just starts
the first one, right?
Yeah, they could be one of the first ones, right? Alongside Saw Gerrera and his crew. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go with this. And obviously these characters don't show up in the original films. You know, they're going to have to figure out a way to kind of get rid of them at some point, or not. And they're just like, yeah, they were here the whole time and they're going to pop up in Mandalorian at some point or whatever.
Yeah, that's always an option too. Is they were busy those days.
Yeah. Seeing Tamora Morrison as Wrecker would be interesting. I will say that. It's, you know, there's a loopy crazy guy.
Well, they do look different than regular clones. So they could, in theory, recast those
They could.
Clones.
Yeah, they could. I mean, Sylvester Stallone as I mean, he's just Hunter funny. Right there. Yeah. I mean, every time I see him, it's just like, that's Rambo.
It is Rambo, yeah.
He just looks like Rambo.
I'm told Dave was asked about that, and he actually said no, he was based on another character who also just looks like Rambo.
That's actually,
it was a character that Rambo was based on, apparently.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, okay. So whatever the case, that's like a very Dave answer to kind of be like, yeah, well, you know, and it doesn't want to actually confirm that that's legit.
That's true.
I don't know. I have a feeling it was just, yeah. It was just
he doesn't like being boxed in so he can say something else later. That's what it is.
Yeah. Oh, here. Did you know the design of Hunter, the leader of Clone Force 99, aka the Bad Batch, was based on Billy Soul from Predator and John Rambo?
That's what it was.
So it was both those characters, Billy Soul and John Rambo. That's like the inspiration for both of them. They look exactly the same, man. I don't even see like
I know.
They both got the bandana, the long black hair. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not a coincidence.
Okay, so it's safe to say that he's based on Rambo. Seeing Sylvester Stallone play this old grizzled version of Hunter would be freaking awesome. Like seeing him in the Star Wars universe, like, what are you doing? Hey, Omega, get over here. You gotta take down the First Order.
Yeah, everything just gets like so slurred.
What's that little green thing? Oh, Grogu. What's a Grogu?
Oh my gosh. That'd be pretty good.
But then that with like maybe Tamura's voice double or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like he's got to have some sort of New Zealand accent, right?
Yeah, exactly. Man, seeing Sylvester Stallone put on a New Zealand accent, I wonder what that sounds like. I can't even imitate.
I don't even know. Like, that's a tricky thing.
I'm trying to come up with it in my head, and I can't. Like, he just always sounds like to me.
Yeah. It's true. It's all just kind of slurred and drawly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like it always sounds like he just went to the dentist and like his mouth is still numb. Actually, he does have some nerve damage in his face on the one side.
So I think that has something to do with how he talks.
I could
But
see that.
it's just so iconic now at this point that, and it's like he just owns it so hard in all his roles. It's just the way, it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, he doesn't have any nerve damage, but he's got this really thick accent that never seems to go away. And
he's got to keep it intentionally.
He's like I don't know. I don't do his impression very well, but yeah, it's
Get down.
Yeah.
I always love Arnie. It always gives me a good laugh.
Arnold Schwarzenegger as Wrecker, Rambo, Sylvester Stallone as Hunter.
They're just remaking that movie that came out a few years ago.
Jesse Eisenberg as Tech.
What was it like? What was the name of that show?
I know what you're talking about. Expendables, right?
That's the one. I almost said Incredibles, but I was like, that's not it.
Yeah. This is Incredibles for adults. Expendables. Yeah, no, it's true. It's like, man, I feel like the Bad Batch could be just Star Wars' version of Expendables.
Oh my gosh. If it was live action, Disney Plus, that's what it would be.
Yeah, they could make bank on that. I mean, people would watch that. Maybe I'm totally wrong about that, but I don't know. I think
it could be good and it could be really bad.
It could be really good and really bad at the same time. Yeah, who knows? Because Expendables is not the best reviewed movie, but
true.
It's a solid action.
So, but back on the show though, this episode.
Yeah.
Did you find it interesting that if the senators don't go along with the Empire is telling them to do, they just get arrested, like just in front of all of their people?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of, I felt that was very in character for the Empire to do. It just, I mean, at this point in time, it's a little softer with them just not getting shot on sight, but they are just puppets. I mean, we find out in A New Hope that the Emperor finally dismantles the Imperial Senate. And, we're seeing kind of the seeds of that take place here, where the senators don't really have a say. They're like there to represent the people, and the Emperor just does what he wants anyways, right?
True.
So,
but it's still risky though, because the people themselves could like riot and
yeah, totally,
like refuse to bow down to the Empire.
Yeah, and then you get a planet like Alderaan that suffers the wrath of the Empire and gets blown up or something like that, right? Like there's gonna be planets like that, and then even worse, there's planets that are 100% on board with the Empire, and then when the Emperor dies, they suffer the wrath of Project Cinder and get blown up as well.
Yeah,
for the failure of the Empire, and punishment on the most loyal planet in the galaxy at the time.
To me, well, I guess they didn't know until it was too late. But if you're gonna die either way, you might as well go down fighting.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's an interesting thing for sure, seeing kind of what happens with these senators who don't want to go along with it. And it makes me wonder whether or not this particular character is going to be a more important reoccurring establishment, in the future, with some political leverage. Yeah, with some political leverage and insight into what the Empire is doing. Although now that he's kind of gone rogue and stuff like that, maybe he won't have any inside word or anything like that. Maybe he won't be as much of a spy as much as a fugitive. But it might be interesting to see what kind of connections he has and whether or not that'll play an influence on the story kind of down the road.
That's a good point. I would be surprised if then he gets into contact with Bail Organa, who we already know was thinking of planning the rebellion. That was an outtake from Revenge of the Sith. And then he'll find out about the Bad Batch, and they'll probably get into contact / start the rebellion that way.
It's true, actually. It's ironic that the Separatist homeworld that they congregate on and have their meetings and everything like that is his planet, right? And he's the senator of that planet. It's interesting to me to think Clone Wars only lasted about 3 years of in-universe time, and this guy's obviously been doing his job a lot longer than 3 years. So he probably knows Bail Organa from the Republic before there was a civil war, like before Dooku decided to up and leave the Jedi and bring like a ton of senators over to his cause and stuff like that, right? Like, and that's just all that
classic politics. They all know each other, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a very interesting 10-year time gap between episodes 1 and 2 in the prequels, and we have these characters that all had these pre-existing friendships and connections, prior to the Civil War. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Bale has some connections like him, maybe that are going to play an impact in whether or not a character like Bale will show up at some point.
Especially because even though he's a separatist, you could tell that he really cared about his people. He wasn't like corrupt and just there for power. Yeah,
exactly. He seemed like a pretty nice guy.
Yeah, exactly. And part of that will also show that the war itself, the Clone War, was manipulated on both sides, and that there's a lot more for the senators and the planets on both sides of the war to get along with than there was for them to actually go to war over.
Yeah, like Dooku was orchestrating the Separatists just as much as Palpatine was orchestrating the Republic, right? Like exactly. The whole thing was designed and choreographed in a way.
And what better way than to have these two senators come together and realize that the real enemy was Palpatine and now the Empire all along.
Yeah. Everyone loses, right? Under Palpatine, everyone's a puppet or a victim or something, right? No one's ever a winner, and even
they're
Vader.
All pawns. Yeah,
and even Vader comes to realize that he is still a slave under Palpatine's mastership, right? Like even though he's kind of changed sides as far as aligning himself with the dark side, he's never not been a slave to something, right?
It's true. And it's kind of funny because maybe I'm misremembering the quote, but he basically, when he confronts Obi-Wan, he describes himself as being a pawn of the Jedi.
Yeah. I mean, he's always kind of, Anakin has always felt like a bit of an outsider. And when it comes to his character, I find he is such a fascinating character because he's just such a hurting guy. And he's the only character, I think, out of anyone in that saga that really, has all these terrible, unfortunate things that have happened to him in his life, right? So, he's raised as a slave. His mother's a slave, mother dies, and he gets pulled into this like Jedi thing that he thinks is gonna be his ticket to free all the slaves, but instead he gets pulled into the politics of the Jedi instead, becomes sucked into that war, and isn't able to save his mother, isn't able to free any slaves, and instead is a slave to his own nightmares of losing his wife, and becomes a slave of the dark side because of that, and then goes on for the next 20 something odd years until he dies. And it's really just like the love for his son that breaks that cycle, right? But he's endlessly a slave of some kind, whether it be to some purpose, right? And he knows that. And I think that's what I feel has always been so fascinating about his relationship with Palpatine, because he's the longest apprentice that Palpatine ever had. And Palpatine is just kind of dragging him along like a dog on a leash. And he always finds a new use for Vader. And this has showed up in the comics quite a bit, because just when you think that, like, okay, Vader's done with Palpatine, he's going to try and attempt to kill him or whatever, something happens where he just backs out of it, or something comes up where he realizes that Palpatine has this plan in place that Vader's just going to get screwed over if he defies his master now or whatever. And he's always being puppeteered. And I think that's what gives him that loyalty in that last battle, when Palpatine is clearly talking about him in front of Luke, going, like your father, you are now mine, right? Like, who talks to anyone like that, right? Who would put up with that, right?
It's funny because
he does.
Yeah. And it's also, this is a bit of a side topic, but
yeah,
the more that's revealed about Palpatine, you realize that if Vader ever tried to take over the Empire, it would probably just collapse.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have the means to actually like coordinate something that big.
Right. No, exactly. He's not a politician. And
exactly.
This kind of goes back to our favorite movie of all time, Attack of the Clones, where where it's like, I don't know, it's just a joke. I don't hate that movie or anything. I'm just, it's a scene that many people dislike though. When him and Padme are in the field and tossing around and stuff like that, having a happy day. And he has this little political speech that he gives her about how he thinks the system should work. And he says, I think we should have a system where everyone sits down, decides what's in the best interest of all the people, and then do it. And then Padme's like, that's exactly what we do. It's just some people don't agree. And then, nothing ever gets done. That's kind of what she's referring to. And then Anakin retorts back and says, well, then someone should make them. Someone should make them, tell them what to do. And that's exactly what the Empire is. It's just an Imperial Senate full of these senators that are just puppets of representing people. But it's ultimately up to one guy just making all the calls, right?
Sure.
Calling all the shots. And that's exactly the kind of system that Anakin wants. And or what he thinks is going to work, at least. And
let's just say also, if this was an absolutely perfect situation and there was no corruption or people were out just to benefit themselves, that would probably work.
Right.
But the problem is people are very greedy, so it never will.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you got like a Sith Lord sitting on the throne of the galaxy, it's not going to work out so well.
That's exactly it, right?
But in contrast to that, it's been very interesting seeing some of this High Republic stuff, because it's quite the opposite scenario. You have this chancellor who is literally 100% in it for the best of the people of the galaxy, and including even people who aren't a part of the Republic, by spending billions and trillions of credits trying to create outreach programs to the Outer Rim and trying to engulf them, right? Like, it's a complete 180 of a plot.
It's a utopia is what it is.
Yeah. And that, I know there are some fans out there who aren't a huge fan of the High Republic stuff, but I've been quite enjoying it because it's just been so different, seeing this completely golden age era and someone who's on the Republic chancellor throne chair, whatever you want to call it, and is doing good stuff, right? Stuff that's not corrupt or for themselves or whatever. So anyway, we've come pretty far from Bad Batch, but there's only
it
so
all
much,
ties together. It's all Star Wars.
It's all Star Wars, and there's only so much Bad Batch to talk about in an hour-long episode anyway. So, anyway, but going back to that episode, was there any last-minute things you wanted to bring up?
I guess I've got a comment and then one last thing here. I want to know, did the clones or the Republic ever have an interrogation droid?
No. I don't believe so.
Because we know the Empire did. So the one we saw, was that an Imperial interrogation droid?
It looks like a prototype of an interrogation droid. Yeah.
It's interesting how it's around already, right?
Yeah, so early on.
Hasn't even been 6 months. They've already got the design and like the prototype out, and they're testing it on senators. Yeah,
pretty crazy, right? I like that quite a bit. I thought that was pretty cool.
I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to really show the solidification of the Empire itself. But part of me also just can't help but think, so they use the exact same technology for 20 something years, for 20 years, and they just never bothered to upgrade it.
I guess they're just that useful. I don't know. I mean, mouse droids have also been around that long. So
that's
maybe
true.
they just work, right? I mean,
really long contracts with manufacturers.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, technology in the Star Wars galaxy seems to improve at a different rate than our real world stuff. But it's all very lo-fi. Once something seems to be built and working, it doesn't really seem to get any better. It seems to just stay the same.
Yeah, it just stagnates. It's true.
Yeah.
Except for light speed, apparently.
Yeah, except for that. Yeah.
Which is funny because it was supposed to be the same. Because it was the same in the prequels and the original trilogy, but now it's just different everywhere else.
Right. In you're referring to High Republic, right?
As well as the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, there was something weird about hyperspace in the sequels where they were just shotgunning through different.
Yeah, the difference was the Navicomputer doesn't need time to calculate.
Yeah. That was really odd. It was just like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, because you just hit go and go and go. Like, and it just works. You don't have to wait for it to calculate that.
All I could think about through that entire sequence was Guardians of the Galaxy 2, when they're like whipping through 150 different portals or whatever in the Guardians ship. All I could think about was that scene, and everyone's eyes going all like googly eyed and boggly, and I was like, oh my goodness, like what is this movie right now? Like, what am I watching? Like, anyway, did James Gunn make this Star Wars movie? I don't think so. Anyway,
it's pretty funny. Anyway, yeah, and it was also just closing words. It was fun to see the clones having to work for a droid, and that they're pretty bitter about it.
Yeah,
and a separatist droid, no less.
Yeah, it's that's a good point. That was pretty funny. And whoever the voice actress was for that droid did a great job.
Agreed.
I didn't catch the name in the credits, but I thought that was spot on for a unique droid voice that we haven't heard before.
That's a good point. And I kind of recognize her voice. So I don't know if she's played other characters in this show or one of the other Star Wars animated series.
It's very possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, High Republic Wave 2 is out. So I don't know how much time we're going to have to get around to reading any of that stuff. But, you know, if the time happens to be on our radar, I'm sure we'll possibly get around to reviewing The Rising Storm, which is the brand new High Republic book written by Kevin Scott, as well as the young adult or a junior reader book, Race to Crash Point Tower. So less of a priority on that one, but Rising Storm, sequel to Light of the Jedi. Sequel to Light of the Jedi is out now, and we'll be possibly taking a look at that as soon as we can. Other than that, we'll catch you next time.
Got a blast.
Those old Jimmy Neutron references. All right, thanks guys for tuning in. And as always, if you want to share this show with a friend, that helps us out a lot. It helps us out with the algorithms, pulling in more listenership and expanding our demographic. So that really does a lot, as well as dropping a 5-star rating. And of course, leaving a few nice words on the iTunes review page or whatever you find, Podchaser. You're welcome to join us on Twitter at SW Escape Podcast. Our Discord link's in the description. It's a small server, but you're welcome to check it out. We got live streaming sometimes in there of reruns of episodes. And we also have an Instagram, which is also fairly new. Still trying to figure out what we're going to do with that, but that's also at SW Escape Podcast. And our email is swescapepodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to send in a voicemail there, as well as our SpeakPipe address, which is linked in the description. It's speakpipe.com/Star Wars Escape Pod, I believe. It's linked down there. And you can find us on pretty much any podcasting platform in the galaxy, all the way from Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Castbox, iHeartRadio, whatever it is, we got you covered. So look for more High Republic related stuff in the near future, since all that stuff is dropping nowadays, as well as the remaining 6 episodes that we have left of the Bad Batch to chat about. We will be getting around to all of that stuff very shortly. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in, and may the Force be with you.